Hi there, and welcome to a very special Insomnia Insight episode where I will talk about something I don't talk that much about, which is myself. In this episode, I will actually talk about myself quite a bit. In fact, this episode will center around two things, which is my entry into medicine, how I became a doctor, and how I became a sleep doctor. And then I want to talk about my exit from medicine. And the first story about my entry is more comical than anything, and maybe a little surprising. I think a few of you'll be surprised to hear it. My exit from medicine is somewhat dramatic. I think it makes for very good content. I think you'll really enjoy it. And mixed in with these two stories, I will also share the story of like the birth of Coach Daniel and the start of this movement, the NATO movement. So I hope you'll really enjoy this. I have been asked about this a few times, and as I said, I think it was 2 weeks ago now. As we have 5,000 subscribers, I wanted to like kind of reintroduce myself and share these stories. So let's start with my entry into medicine and how did I become a doctor and how did I become a sleep doctor? Well, the idea of becoming a doctor for me, it was quite natural because my dad is a doctor and he's always loved his work. He's retired now, but he loved being a surgeon. And my mom is a nurse, so both were in healthcare. So where I grew up in Sweden, it's not like in the U.S. where after you finish high school, you do like 4 years of undergrad studying, where you can sort of see what is a good fit for you, etc. And rather, you have to sort of decide when you're 18, if you decide to go to college at that point, you have to decide what are you going to do. Are you going to become a nurse, a doctor, a lawyer? Like you decide right there and then. And for me, I didn't ponder this too much. I saw my dad being very fulfilled, very, very happy being a doctor, and I thought that could be something for me. I applied. And here's the thing. Um, Here's the story of how I got into medicine. So I was something of a slacker in high school. Uh, I had basically like barely passing grades in all my subjects, and this was because I loved my life at the time. I had so much fun, so many friends. I played music. I was in a band. I had long hair. I was just it was a great time for me, and studying was not that fun, to be honest with you. But um, there was this thing that kept me from being too worried about the future, which was what in Sweden is called högskoleprovet. It is similar to the what's that called again here in the States? You have this like this general assessment. I forget the name of it now as I'm speaking. Uh, well, if you're in the US, it's like this test of like your general how well you'll do in college, something like that. And so I did well on that test in my first year of high school, and so I felt that I had a good chance of getting into university at a later point. So that was part of the story. Anyways, towards the I think midway through my final year of high school, I applied to all the med schools in Sweden, and one of them, which is in Stockholm, it's known as the Karolinska. They had a system where you got called for interviews based on your score of this test. So I got called for an interview. I got to the second interview, and things were going really well. And I remember to this day the moment where I was in my friend's place. His name was Peter, and he had internet, which I didn't have, and they were going to announce who got into med school on the internet, which was kind of a new thing then. So sitting there waiting, we were uploading, refreshing, and there was the list, and my name was on it, and it was amazing. I was so happy. I was so happy I was going to be a doctor. It was the most amazing thing ever. But here's the thing: there were certain pre-requirements. Like I had a spot, but that spot was contingent upon a few things. One of them was a passing grade in math, chemistry, and physics. So that I had to have a passing grade in those subjects, and I felt pretty good about chemistry and math. I knew I was going to get passing grades on those, but physics I was not so sure. I struggled a lot with physics. It did not come easy to me at all. So I want to say this was about 3 4 weeks before I was supposed to graduate and get my final grades. I asked my physics teacher. Her name was I think her full name was Margarita. We knew her as Magan, and she was feared. She was a old school teacher. She kept a high level discipline in her classroom. So I sort of reverently approached her, and I think it was after a class, and I said, Magan, I've got into med school, and I just want to make sure I get a passing grade in physics. And she said, no, you're not getting no passing grade. Like, you've been slacking off. You haven't done well. You've hardly passed any exams. Like, you failed most of your exams. Like, you're not getting a passing grade. And I was like panicking inside. I was like, oh my gosh, this dream I now have, like this future I see ahead of me is being destroyed in front of my eyes. Like, what's happening? And I didn't know what to say at first, but then I said, but what can I do? Like, what can I do to get a passing grade in physics? And she said, well, Daniel, you were absent. I had some what do you call it? Like, I had a student council thing going on. So you said, so you were absent when your classmates took a test. So you missed that test. So you'll have to take that test, and you need to score well. Not just the passing grade. You need to score really well on this test, and then I will consider giving you a passing grade. Well, I felt that there was this sliver of hope now. I could make it. There was a possibility for me to make it, but I was still very scared. I was still very scared because, again, there were 3 years where I had been slacking off. I hadn't done much work at all, so this was weighing heavy upon me. But I got my physics books. I started studying. Quickly, I realized there's no way. I can't learn this by myself. But there was this guy named Jimmy. He was a friend of ours, and I had a few other kind of slacker friends. So when we needed help with something, math or physics, like that, we asked Jimmy. He was this super nice guy, this like tall guy, like this gentle giant, and he would always help us. So I went to him and said, "Hey, Jimmy, you gotta help me. This is super important." He said, "Sure, of course." Uh, and by the way, he always helped us, and we offered him like to pay him and things like that, and he'd always refuse. One time we got him to accept a pizza. So we bought a pizza one time, but that's the only thing he ever accepted. But anyway, I went to Jimmy. He said he would help me. I went over to his apartment, and we sat down and we looked over some things, and he started working with me. And pretty quickly, I would say within the first like 30, 40 minutes, he came to the same realization that I had already come to, which was that it was too late. There was no way I was going to get a good grade on this physics exam. I mean, it was years of work that I had to that I had not, I hadn't done well. So he said, you know what, Daniel, here's the thing. When you were absent, we did this test. It's already been scored. I have the test here. Of course, he got like straight A. He got a really good grade on that test. He said, take my test and just hope you get the same one. I think that's your best shot. So I was like, yeah, that's it. That's the only shot I have. So I took his test, went home, and for the next week or so, I just memorized it. I memorized the whole thing. And there were not that many questions. Maybe there were like 13 or 14 questions, but physics, as you know, you have to present your answer, right? So I didn't understand anything. I just knew. I just memorized the numbers. I put this in front of this sign here, equal sign here, etc., etc. I just went over it many times. Finally, it was time, and Magana told me where to show up, and she showed me into this little room that I had all by myself. The test was sitting there, on the bench. There was a pen, and she said, "Take your time. There's no rush. Whenever you're done, you can tell me, and we'll go from there." So she closes the door. I sit down on this workbench, and the exam is in front of me. It's upside down. So this is the moment. Truthfully, I turn it around, and it's the same test. It is the same test. I'm so happy. I'm so excited. And like right away, I don't waste a minute. I just jot down all the answers I memorized. It's such a relief. Like, I'm just getting it all out. It looks really nice and tidy. It takes about 5 minutes. And I'm like, I can't, tell her I'm done now. That will be a little suspicious. So I just sit there for like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, something like that. And then I called Megan and said, I did my best. And here you go. And she said, okay, all right. Okay, so I now am feeling pretty optimistic that I will get into med school, but I'm not certain at all. First of all, she could get suspicious. That could happen, and she could call me out, something like that. And I still don't know. Like, did I get it right? Maybe maybe I didn't get it right. Maybe I didn't memorize it correctly. And will it be enough for a passing grade? I still don't know these things. So I let about a week pass, and now I'm like literally like 10 days or something from graduation. And I see Magan in the hallway, and I approach her and I say, "Hey, Magan, did you get a chance to look at my exam?" And she looked actually very pleased, and she looked me in the eyes and she said, "Daniel, I was actually impressed with how much you learned in just a few weeks. I was impressed by that." She didn't say that she was going to give me a passing grade, but I knew it. At that point, I knew it. I knew I was in. I knew I did it. And in retrospect, I'm like, uh, you know, as you get older, you think in different ways. At that time, I thought it was just like, it was just fantastic. I was just so happy. But like looking back, if somebody made the case that, well, Daniel, you should have put in more work, your spot in medical school should have actually gone to somebody else. That would have been fair. I can't argue with that. You think a little differently when you look back on things. But anyways, that was the story of my entry into med school. So I went to med school in Stockholm, and towards the end of med school, I I I felt the need to go, to go somewhere, to explore something. Like I lived most of my life in Sweden, and I have very fond memories of Sweden. But I had deep inside me, I felt like there must be something else. I wanted to explore. I had that need, that desire to go somewhere. And I heard that medical education was really good in the U.S., in the United States. And so then, towards the end of my last year in medical school, I started preparing to move to the United States. And long story short, I passed the exams, without cheating. I really put in the work. Did well on the licensing exams, and in 2000 and I want to say 2007, right? Yeah, I started my pediatric residency in the Bronx, New York. And at that point, I had this idea that I was going to do something kind of intense. My dad is a surgeon. I thought maybe I'm going to be a pediatric intensivist or something like that. But very quickly, during my residency years, it became clear to me that that was not my path. That was not my path. I was like, I don't want to work weekends, nights. I don't want stress. I'm going to do something else. I wanted to specialize in something, but I didn't know why. Randomly, I had a friend. His name is Nicholas, and I had a beer with him in the Upper East Side in New York. And he just in passing said, "Hey, Daniel, do you know if there's a fellowship in sleep medicine?" He said, "Yeah, I think pay isn't that great, but the lifestyle is amazing." When I heard that, I was like, "Really, sleep medicine? That's interesting." I started reading up on it, and I thought, like, this could fit me really well. I'm interested in like high functions of the brain, and my lifestyle sounds good. So I applied, and I got into fellowship, University of Chicago. This was, I think, 2010, maybe 2011, somewhere there. Now, during this fellowship, we learned, I would say, very little about insomnia. Most of it was focused on obstructive sleep apnea. But we did learn like the basics of cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBT-I. So I knew that. Then when I graduated and actually went back to New York to practice where I had done my residency as a sleep doctor, um, it dawned on me that insomnia was this big thing, right? It was a maybe a bigger problem than obstructive sleep apnea. So many of my patients struggle with insomnia. So I started trying these CBT-I techniques, and over time, I saw that these things, education can help. But I had a very poor understanding of insomnia. I still thought that insomnia is like, you have some trouble sleeping, and then you start spending like 14 hours in bed, and you don't really see that that isn't going to help. So I thought, like kind of traditional CBTI teaching, that the key is really to just spend little time in bed and have a good sleep efficiency, and then you can kind of like make your sleep drive overpower any anxiety you have, and then you sleep, and then you can extend that. Something like that was sort of my understanding of insomnia for the longest time. Then I moved to Oregon for family reasons, and uh, at some point, this was in 2017. Now, I go to this sleep conference in Boston, and I had previously done an app for restless leg syndrome, where you kind of check leg movements and sleep. So I had a little bit of work with apps. I had an idea that you could do an app for insomnia, something like that. Then during the sleep conference, like, for some reason, I just had this idea for bedtime for the app. It was just actually an algorithm. I saw that, if you if you create an algorithm, you can do sleep efficiency in a kind of very easy way. And that's how bedtime was born. It turned out to be not a good idea at all. But I created an app, and when I created that app, I was like, how am I going to market this? And I heard that you should, from Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary Vee, he said you should talk about whatever you're doing. So I started this YouTube channel, and through this YouTube channel, this is really where I started to learn by answering questions, answering emails. Then I started understanding that insomnia was not at all what it was taught to me in, like, with traditional CBT-I. It was a very different thing. It was an emotional struggle, and the teaching is, it's more like a spiritual journey. Spiritual teaching really is what helps. And so that is, briefly the story of kind of how Coach Daniel started to happen and how the Nato movement started to happen. And I don't want to spend too much time there because I think there are other things that are more I think you'll enjoy more to hear about, which is, the second topic here, which is my exit from medicine. Okay, so we've seen now how I get into medicine. We've seen how I start working as a sleep doctor here in Oregon, and I have these ideas about insomnia, right? And so, as I'm working here as a sleep doctor, here in Oregon, like, I'm really, really starting to seeing the problems with the approach to insomnia. So I really go towards, like, medications. I cannot prescribe medications. It becomes something like I did that early on in my career in New York, but here, the years I worked in Oregon, I didn't. I mean, there might have been like one, two, three times, something like that. I did for some reason, but generally speaking, I didn't. It became like a total no-no for me because I couldn't get myself to do something I felt wasn't helping my patients. Rather, I wanted to spend time on education. And I'll also say that, medicine became less and less inspiring. I had entered medicine as thinking that I can really help people in this field, but I started to see things differently. Most of my patients had obstructive sleep apnea, and for most of the time, I felt like you don't even need a test. And someone tells you, yeah, like, I snore like crazy, I stop sleeping, I stop breathing in my sleep, I feel so sleepy during the day. You pretty much know that that person has sleep apnea. And even if you don't, my thinking was, why couldn't we just, like, give this person a CPAP machine, and they could try it and see how they do? Why do we have to do all this testing? It's time consuming, it's costly, right? And also, when I read the literature on obstructive sleep apnea, it became very clear to me that there was no evidence actually that having obstructive sleep apnea caused any health issues. Again, nothing here is medical advice, but as I often say, obstructive sleep apnea I saw had not been shown to cause any sleep issues. So the whole model, I came to question: why is it that somebody who thinks they have sleep apnea has to go to their doctor, get a referral to a sleep doctor, go see the sleep doctor, have a test, go back, review the test, go back maybe for a second test with a CPAP machine on? It is very costly, very cumbersome. When in reality, I thought, why can't we just, honestly, why can't a CPAP machine just be available over the counter? And somebody who thinks they have sleep apnea can try it on. And if they want to test, they can have it. But as it is now, a CPAP machine is a medical device, and you need a prescription to get it. Very costly and cumbersome. And I felt I was sort of trapped in the situation where I was getting paid very well, but I was paid very well because there was all this red tape, and people were basically coerced to pay, something like that. It didn't feel right for me. And I think that was reflected maybe in the fact that I couldn't spend, like, 30 minutes creating a long note that justified a high billing level, and things of that nature. It just didn't feel right to me. So I did the best I could. I mean, I thought I would work for a sleep doctor for many, many years. So I did my notes. They were sparse, but I think they were sufficient. I thought I practiced in a very safe way. I never had any negative outcome. Everything went okay. But you know, I think when you practice in this way, and it's very, very different from how other people practice, you sort of you sort of make people look themselves in the mirror, and that can be very uncomfortable, I think. When you see a colleague who practices in a very different way, and that colleague says, "Well, I just think I just do what I think, in my heart is best for my patients. I don't put them through, expensive testing. I don't try to force them to use a CPAP machine when I don't think there's any negative health outcome that has been shown to come off not using it and things of that nature. So I started getting complaints from colleagues who said you should do more like this, Daniel. And I sort of I stood my ground. I said no, there's no evidence for that, etc. And I got into sit downs with superiors, and they said you have to change this, and my style was like, okay, well, I'll change it, I'll do whatever you want. And then there was, I pieced everyone, and then they said, but this is wrong too, Daniel, and I changed that and I pieced that, etc. And I think the whole thing about me not prescribing medications for insomnia, that also didn't sit well with a lot of people, because I think, again, it makes people kind of question their own practice styles and this and that. So uh, pretty much exactly a year ago, in March of 2021, um, or actually, like, yeah, late February of 2021, I was just notified that I was on administrative leave, which actually another doctor in my hospital had been on before. So it was sort of shocking, but it seemed to be like not that not that unusual, I guess. So I was like, okay, and they said it was because of my documentation. And at this point, I'm like, okay, well, probably they will come up with some kind of action plan. And again, I'll try to change my way. And my thinking at this time was that I wanted to exit medicine. Uh, I had seen that I couldn't do the work I wanted to do within the system, and I had started working on bedtime. I had, I think I had written Set It and Forget It, and the YouTube channel was growing, and I saw that this is the direction I want to go in. I want to go towards coaching and entrepreneurship, but my thinking was I'm going to stay in medicine for maybe 2 or 3 years more, and save some money and kind of prepare myself for this exit. So that's the state of mind I was in. So I was sort of shocked when I was put on administrative leave, but I had some other ideas as well. So you know, to me, it was just a question of time when I was going to exit. Anyway, that one state of mind. But then exactly about a year ago, the 2 week administrative leave was over, and I was called to this meeting with my boss, her boss, and an HR person. And I did bring my badge because I thought maybe I'm going to be let go, but I didn't think I was going to be. I wasn't sure at the time, but I came to the meeting, and it was clear very early on that I was being let go. I was being fired from my work. And you know, part of me was scared, but mostly I was relieved. Mostly I was relieved because I wasn't doing the work I wanted to do. Like, the reasons I wanted to become a doctor, uh, they just weren't there. Like, I wasn't getting fulfilled there. So I just thanked everyone for having had given me a chance to work for the organization, and I got 3 months of severance pay, and that's how I got fired. And so again, like, why did I get fired? I think I made it clear here that I think my practice style just wasn't compatible with the system. And so yeah, that's it. That's how my entry to medicine and my exit from medicine. And um, as I was just preparing to do this video, some questions came up to me, which are they're personal to me, but also general. And one is like, what's the future of medicine? The way I see it, if you think about why we humans go to see a doctor, I think such a great percentage of that has to do with the inner struggle. Uh, it's quite obvious when we talk about things like insomnia, anxiety, depressions, PTSD, like chronic pain, things of that nature. I think a lot of that has to do with inner struggle, but also things like diabetes. Why is diabetes so rampant? Well, it is because of overweight and obesity. And where does that come from? Well, it's the same thing that also comes from we have these emotions that we don't want to feel. And one way to not feel them is to eat. When we eat to escape an emotion or to achieve an emotion, we become overweight and we get diabetes and joint problems and all these things. Or we look at smoking, you know, which I think still to this day causes a lot of healthcare costs. Like, that's the same thing. So uh, I think clearly this is a place for like traditional medicine, like like OBGYN and things like that. Clearly, but in my mind, it's almost like 70 to 80% of what we think of as medicine, y- you know, could 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 be better met with something like what we do here, I believe. So I think medicine has, has to sort of decide where it wants to go. Does it want to become like a place of healing where we incorporate like the woo woo, and like the inner journey and like learning about your emotions, and like does medicine want to transform itself in that way, or does it want to go in another direction where it says no, we take care of the clearly physical things, and we let we sort of refer everything else somewhere else. I don't know what the future of medicine is, but that's one question. And very similarly, what's the future of coaching? And as you can imagine, like I think there is like this golden era for coaching ahead of us. I think we're just like scratching the surface of the surface of the surface, really, when it comes to like how much impact the type of teachings that we have here can have on humanity. I think it's just astounding what a transformation we could see happen. If you think about, again, obesity, smoking, substance abuse, insomnia, like chronic pain, all of this could be so greatly helped, I believe, with the type of teaching we have here. So I think there is a revolution that is on our doorsteps, and I think it will take it'll take like 30, 40 years probably before we see like, enlightenment at scale. But I think we'll get there one day. So on a final notes here, the sleep coach school happened because uh, partly because of this. The idea was that there are many people that are maybe in the traditional medicine who don't understand insomnia and could go through like a course and could spread that, but that didn't work. So now it's becoming more like where the idea becomes to train coaches who can go out and create their own like YouTube channels, Instagram, and start their own businesses, and that kind of the message can spread that way. And and uh, uh, and bedtime is same idea, really. So all I do is really connected to this kind of vision of coaching, making a real difference in the universe. So I'll conclude there. I hope you found this entertaining, and you maybe learned something about me that you didn't know. And yeah, I guess the last thing I want to say is I'm so grateful. Like without you, uh, everyone who's like commenting, watching, sharing your stories, like there would be nothing. I don't know I don't know where I would have been if it wasn't for you. So last thing I want to say is a big thank you for all the support and encouragement, and I look forward to many more years sharing this journey with you, and hopefully making a dent in the sleep universe and beyond. So that's it. I'll end there, and enough talking about me. Let me know what you thought about this episode, and any comments are really appreciated as always, and we'll go from there. Bye bye.